Unfortunately, there's a reason why even if you work really hard on your tones, they're probably still not accurate. And why is that? It all comes down to three things. Number one, welcome back to Julie Two Shoes, a channel where we talk about language learning and diving into East Asian culture. Today, the topic we're going to tackle is why your tones when speaking Mandarin Chinese don't sound native-like and how to fix them. You may be wondering, who is this person and why should I listen to her? Well, a short introduction. My Chinese name is Siying, and I was born in Changchun, which is a city in northeastern China. And I grew up speaking Mandarin Chinese with a very standard accent. Okay, so I'm a native Mandarin speaker, but that doesn't necessarily make me an expert on tones, right? Completely right. I agree. So that's why I went ahead and got my master's degree in Chinese linguistics, and my PhD dissertation was on Mandarin lexical tones. I'm not going to bore you with all the specifics of my PhD dissertation, so we're going to go right into the three main reasons why your tones don't sound native-like. I'm going to assume you already have learned the basics of the tones. Ma, 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 ma. Very straightforward. Or so you think. Unfortunately, there's a reason why even if you work really hard on your tones, they're probably still not accurate. And why is that? It all comes down to three things. Number one, tone charts are wrong. Two, Tone Sandhi. And three, the fact that tones have their own phonological properties outside of their pitch contours. So the first reason why your tones are not accurate is because tone charts are wrong. So you probably studied tones like this, in a chart like this, where 1 represents the lowest natural part of your voice and 5 represents the highest natural part of your voice. As someone who learned tones as a baby without looking at any charts, the first time I saw this chart, I was like, what the heck? This is totally inaccurate. I'm gonna go over all 4 tones one by one. So the first tone, which they say is a high 5 the entire time, is incorrect. Tone 1 is not a high tone. If you just hear me speak the Chinese word for 1, which is a tone 1, you'll understand. 1 in Chinese is yi, 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 2, 3, 4, yi. So yi is actually quite in the middle of my natural vocal range. If I tried to do it like a high 5, it would be like yi. It just sounds so weird. I don't know what it is. I think it is some kind of conspiracy. I think the teachers and the textbooks are lying to you that tone 1 is a high 5. It is not. When you try to make every word that's tone 1 a high 5, you sound really unnatural, and it's actually a lot of extra work for you to try to make it that high. Tone 1, a natural mid to slightly higher mid flat tone like E, 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 like this. I would say tone 2 is relatively correct. It starts slow and goes high from the bottom to the highest. So if I just say some words in Chinese and you can just hear it for yourself. Shen, he, she, twin, men. Okay, tone 3, I have major beef with tone 3 and the way it's depicted. You see it goes down and then it goes up to 4. That is definitely incorrect. For most native speakers of Chinese, tone 3 is essentially just a low tone where you just kind of go down at the end. And in certain circumstances, it goes up, but not all the time. I'm going to tell you more about when tone 3 goes up and when it doesn't in Tone Sandhi, but just know for now, tone 3 does not go up higher than the way it starts. That's totally incorrect. It's basically a low tone. Tone 4, I would say, is pretty correct. No major complaints there. It's a high falling tone like he, she. So the number 2 reason why your tones probably don't sound accurate is because of Tone Sandhi. So Chinese, and like many other tonal languages, have something called Tone Sandhi. What it is when that 2 specific tones meet together, they actually have some kind of systematic tone change that affects one or both of the tones. In Chinese, the tone that changes most frequently is tone 3. So I'm going to tell you a bit more about that. Tone 3 is really problematic, so just stay tuned and hear the whole story. So what happens, the first part of this rule is when a tone 3 and a tone 3 meet, the first tone 3 turns into a tone 2. I'll just put these 2 words separately and then I'll put them together and you can see the difference. You have the word hen and the word 好. So you have 很, which means very, and 好, which means good. When they're separate, they're both tone 3. But if you put them together, the first tone 3 turns into tone 2. So 很 becomes 很, and then you have 好, which stays the same. However, and this is something that Chinese linguists have learned through research, and I've also seen it in my research, when you have two tone 3s together, the first tone 3 that turns into tone 2 is not a full tone 2. It's actually a half of a tone 2. So if you just hear me say it quickly, 很好, 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 you can hear that it's not a full tone 2. A full tone 2 would be 很, but here we have 很好. It kind of cuts off at the middle of the going rising, and it goes back down to 好. So the second part of the tone 3 Tone Sandhi rule is that, to be honest with you, tone 3 is hardly ever a full tone 3. It's kind of like a ghost, honestly. Tone 3 is only a full tone 3, which means it goes down and then up, when it's at the end of a phrase or a sentence. In any other position, it is a half tone 3, which means it only goes down. It doesn't go up. So I'll give you another example. You have the word 很 and 棒. That means very good. So if you put these two together, the first 很 turns into a half of a tone 3. So instead of 很棒, native speakers will say 很棒, 很棒. And the last part of Tone Sandhi are basically revolved around two specific words, 一 and 不. If you had a good Chinese teacher, you probably learned this, but I just wanted to give you a refresher anyway. 一, which means 1 in Chinese, it is tone 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1. It's always tone 1, 1, except in front of tone 4. So let's say you have the word 一 and then 个, which is a very common one of an item. 一 and then 个 in front of tone 4, it turns into tone 2. So when you say it together, you say 一个, 一个, not 一个. Okay? Let's say you have 一 and then you have 扇门, which means a door. 扇 is the measure word for door. So if you have 一 and then 扇门, you actually have 一扇门. 一扇门. That is the correct way to say it in this context. The second part of this rule is the word 不, which means not or no. 不 is usually tone 4, like 不好, 不喜欢. But when it's in front of another tone 4, it gets very shy and it turns into tone 2. So let's say you have the word 不 and then 是. You probably heard this one, it's very common. It turns into 不是, not 不是, 不是. Let's say you have the word 不 in front of the word 像, which means not like. You actually have 不像, 不像. And then the third reason why your tones probably don't sound accurate is because tones have phonological properties outside of pitch contours. You probably heard from Chinese teachers and other people who've learned Chinese that Chinese is relatively easy in terms of phonology because there's no stress and every syllable is the exact same kind of like stress and things like that. But that's actually not true. Why is that not true? To explain this, I need to explain what kind of tones Mandarin have. So the tones that Mandarin have are something called contour tones. And contour tones just means that the tone changes height throughout the kind of process of the tone. So whether it falls or it goes up, that makes it a contour tone. Mandarin Chinese have 3 contour tones, 2, 3, and 4. And tone 1 is what we call a register tone, which means it's a flat tone. If you gave native Mandarin speakers kind of the vocal recordings of people speaking certain tones, but you get rid of the actual pitch contour. Basically, like in music, you strip out the notes. What you have left is duration, basically how long the sound is, and 2, the intensity, like the volume of the sound. Mandarin speakers can actually tell you what tone it is without any pitch, without any tone, no notes. They can tell you what tone it is. And why is that? It's because every tone in Mandarin Chinese has its own duration and intensity. So I'm going to start with tone 1. Tone 1 is basically just a flat tone. right? You can see that the duration is quite normal for a syllable and there are no kind of intensity changes. It's the same kind of volume the entire time. He, she, me, it's just the same. So tone 2 is a rising tone. So what happens when you have a rising tone, this is a natural acoustic property that when you start low and go higher, what happens is you start quiet and you end loud. So this is for every tone too. It's basically starts quiet and goes loud. So without hearing any kind of tone like pitch, I can tell you that this is a tone 2, because if you hear me say a tone 2 sound like sh, you can hear that I started quiet and get louder as I go to the end, right? And so in this way, tone 2 is around the same duration as a tone 1, but maybe slightly longer. And now tone 3. So tone 3 is, as you can imagine, since it goes down and up sometimes, this is the longest tone when it's said in full, like how, right? It's quite long when it's said in full. Tone 3 also is the quietest in terms of the volume out of all 4 tones, because as I mentioned before, it is a low tone for native speakers. So instead of like, you have how and you have how and you have how, right? How, it's quite low. So it is basically like, what can I say? It's a natural vocal cord thing to not be able to say low sounds very loud. So tone 3 just ends up being kind of like a quiet thing that ends and goes up slightly. And then tone 4, as you can imagine, similar to tone 2, is the opposite. It starts off loud and it gets quieter as it goes, because when you have a loud sound, it's easier to make that sound, and when you finish it, it's quieter. So you have how. You can hear that I started off loud and then I ended up quieter. And then the duration for tone 4 is the shortest, because just of the acoustic properties, it's easy to be done with this tone in the shortest amount of time. So why am I telling you all this? I'm saying all this because Mandarin speakers, they don't just use the contour like up and down to try to convey what tone they're saying. They also use the duration and the loudness of what they're saying to kind of get their point across. And listeners also use these clues to try to figure out what they're saying, especially if the environment is loud or there are some homophones or something like that. So what does this mean for you, someone who's learning Mandarin Chinese? I would say that it's important for you to listen to native speakers speak full sentences and then try to mimic exactly how they're saying each word in context. Specifically the contours, like the falling or rising, the duration, like how long each syllable is, and also the intensity, like how loud each syllable is. It may seem unnatural to do this, but mimicking native speakers is what babies did when they're growing up, and that's how I learned Mandarin as well. So I think this is the best and most surefire way to improve your Mandarin tones and also your language speaking skills in general. 加油!